Assalamu alaikum. My name is Mehreen Muzammil. I am working as clinical pharmacist at Aga Khan University Hospital. Today we have two esteemed guests with a very informative topic, and that is medication safety, KPIs driven medication safety. So our first speaker is Madam Sahrish Nazar. She did her Bachelor of Pharmacy from Karachi University and Masters in Pharmaceutical Sciences from St. John's University. She is recipient of Fulbright Scholarship USA. She has vast experience of implementing quality policies at hospital for medication safety. Currently, she is working as inpatient manager at Aga Khan University Hospital. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Marine, and Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you for this kind introduction, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank the organizers and of this Giving Back to Pakistan platform for giving us this opportunity to give in return to our country after learning from different experiences and from different experiences and learnings. So thank you so much. I will now start my presentation, and as Marine mentioned, that this is related to the medication safety and the key performance indicators that drive this medication safety in the hospital pharmacy. So I'll open up my presentation. Please confirm me, Marine, if it is visible.
Yes, ma'am, it's visible.
All right. So first of all, a disclosure that I do not have any conflict of interest, and all this is voluntarily, and no financial or commercial funding has been gained from this today's session. So the objective for today's presentation would mainly revolve around the medication safety. What is the medication safety? What are the components of medication safety, followed by the key performance indicators, and which KPIs are currently used in the pharmacy practice, and how you can start a KPI within your organization in your department. So the goal of every medication, so the goal of every medication therapy is very basic, and I would try to keep the things simple so that it is easy to comprehend at every level. May you be a student or working in some organization. Okay, so our goal is very simple, that we have to achieve a defined therapeutic outcome that improves a patient quality of life while minimizing the patient risk. ठीक है, तो हमें जो है अपना थेरेप्यूटिक आउटकम चाहिए, और उस थेरेप्यूटिक आउटकम के दौरान हमें कोई पेशेंट रिस्क भी नहीं चाहिए. This is our goal. Now, what is medication safety? From this goal drives actually, or comes out actually, the medication safety. That while achieving this goal, there should be a freedom from accidental injury, and which could happen due to any medical care or the medical error. And this definition has been provided by the American System of Hospital System Pharmacists. So the key word is accidental injury, something which is not intended during the course of the treatment. Then what is medication error? Again, this is that preventable event that may cause or lead to an inappropriate medication use or the patient harm. And this all is occurring while the medication is in control of the healthcare professional, patient, or a consumer. Now, this medication error, this could be related to the professional practice. It could be due to some healthcare products or the procedure or the system that was in place. There might be some gaps in the system. It may be due to the product itself, like the labeling, packaging, or it could be due to some other steps in the medication use process overall, and which we will discuss in my coming slides. So be it the medication safety or the medication error that is coming out of the medication safety, these are all those events which are not intended or which are not desirable. So what is the magnitude of the problem, right? And we all are aware about the famous report by the Institute of Medicine, and that landmark report, which was released in 1999, and that gave these numbers that around 44,000 to 98,000 deaths they occur annually as a result of these medical errors in the hospitals. And this is a report that actually opened the eyes towards this my patient safety and medication safety concept. And according to that report, the these medical errors, they become the 8th leading cause of death in America, and these unintended outcomes actually has a certain cost as well. And this is the numbers like around up to 29 billion annually. At that time, it was quoted, and this is due to the medical errors. I've also come across a study, and that was Australian based, and that quotes a figure that approximately 2,30,000 hospital admissions occur each year as a result of the medication misadventure and inappropriate use of medicines. And it also gives a certain cost which comes to the healthcare system annually. So these are the figures, and these figures have evidence behind it. But at times, जब हम ये नंबर्स कोट करते हैं तो हमारे जहन में ये होता है कि अच्छा ठीक है, ये उन कंट्रीज में हुआ, ये 1999 की रिपोर्ट थी, ठीक है, अब सिस्टम्स बेहतर हो गए होंगे, ठीक है, और ये हमें शायद इतने पर्सनल लेवल पर टच नहीं करते एट टाइम्स. दिस इज व्हाट आई फील. बट देन लेट मी कोट एन एग्जांपल फ्रॉम पाकिस्तान एज वेल. एंड हम सबको याद होगा कि कुछ अर्से पहले एक इंसिडेंट हुआ था इन अ प्राइवेट हॉस्पिटल where a wrong medication, a high alert medication, was inadvertently administered to a child, and that poor child was admitted because of diarrhea condition, and that ended up into this medication error. ये हुआ, हम सबको बहुत बहुत रियलाइज हुआ कि हाँ, इस तरह से भी हो सकता है. आप किसी एक चीज के लिए जाते हैं, and this is how you can end up if the processes and the guidelines and the SOPs are not in place or are not followed, right? ये एक केस था. Then there's a famous case occurring currently in America at this very moment, and we might be aware about it, where there was a case of a sound-like medication error, Versed, which is an Vicuronium, Midazolam. इसके अंदर वाइस वर्सा हुआ, मेडिकेशन एरर हुआ, that patient died, and that patient was undergoing an MRI, and she was giving a midazolam, but then accidentally the nurse administered Vicuronium. So currently, while the reports is there out there, the data is out there, the processes is there, these type of incidents, if they are occurring in the first world countries, developed countries, then at the same time this is there in our country as well, in our part of the world as well, right? So we need to understand first the severity, what can happen, what can go wrong. So all this is very important. The safe medication practices actually can occur at any point of the medication use system. And what I mean by the medication use system, I'll take few minutes on this slide to explain you that during the life cycle or during the journey of a medication, from the time it is selected and procured in the hospital till the time it is administered to the patient, what are the stages involved, and at what stages, what are the risks involved. So I will try to briefly cover this in my next few minutes. Okay, so starting from the planning, the safe medication practices actually begin with placing medication safety as an organizational and departmental priority. So this has to be there at the highest leadership level, and which will trickle down to the bottom or those which are interacting with the patient, the frontline staff. And this has to be set as a organization and department priority. And you have to implement a system which will support these practices. So right from starting the planning, the selection and procurement, how and which medication to be selected, how it will be procured, what is the criteria behind the selection of a certain medication. You look at the efficacy, you look at the safety, you look at its economics. So this is very basic criteria, which is also supported by the best practices as well. So whenever you have to make a certain drug available in, or make a formulary inclusion, you see what is the data available regarding to its safety, what is going to be its cost, how effective it is. And at the same time, if agar hum is lihaz se baat kare that what are the lookalike and sound like risk involved, is it a high alert medication? What this medication will have an impact with the other medications available in the formulary. So you decide at this level at the time of selection that whether it's a safe selection or not. Then once it comes into your facility, how it is stored, it's very important. If it's a sound like medication, whether you are storing it to a LASA counterpart, if it's a high alert medication, who should have access to this, whether this drug needs to be placed in the flow stock or it will be restricted to certain locations in the pharmacy only, what is it's going to be the temperature of its storage, what will be, who will do the flow stock inspections if it's there in the flow stock, or you need to put it in, if it's a crash cart, what is going to be the inspection, the frequency, the storage, and the safety. Is it going to be in a lock and key, or you will need to maintain certain, like for the control medications, how it will be stored. So the storage here plays a very important part. And at the same time, not only at the pharmacy and storage with regards to the patient care area as well. Like I mentioned, the flow stocks. At the same time, is it placed at the bedside or is it in the custody of the nurse, right? So at the level of the storage, you need to place certain checks. You need to have certain strategies and the policies in place. Then followed by the patient admission. Now patient has come into your facility. What we will do? You will take a medication history. You will try to identify what were the medications that the patient was taking at home. Now, whether these medications are accurately captured by the physician, or if the pharmacist is involved in the medication reconciliation process, then all these medications, whether are reconciled, identified, reconciled, are they entered into the system, or they made the part of the medical record. The new medication orders that are now entered, is there any interaction between these home medications and the new medication orders? Is there any medication which needs to be held? So all these decisions, this is occurring at this stage. So the medication reconciliation part, right? So this is very important. Then what is the next step? Patient aa gaya, patient is there in the ward. Now the physician is writing the orders. Now what is the mode of writing these orders? Are these manual prescriptions or are they transcribed through some computerized physician order entry system? Now, if they are given ordered through the manual prescriptions, now what is the legibility? What are the practices regarding this error-prone abbreviations used or certain symbols which are not to be used? Is this according to the hospital criteria of use, like certain antibiotics? Are these medication orders according to that? Is this in compliance with your restricted medications policy? Now, or is it written by the authorized oncologist if it's a certain oncology medication, right? So all these checks have to be built in at this stage. Now, an order has safely come from a physician end and it is appearing at the pharmacist's screen, or the order has come to the pharmacist. Now, if it needs to be prepared, how it's being prepared? Are the best practices of sterile preparation being followed? Is the correct doses being calculated? The one who is preparing these medications, that staff, is whether he is trained and credentialed in preparing. So this is the stage where you need to implement or you need to adopt the best practices. The next step in this cycle, dispensing. The pharmacist has reviewed and processed the order. The pharmacist, whether the pharmacist has reviewed the drug appropriateness, the pharmacist has performed the drug appropriateness review, and in the drug appropriateness review, whether he has reviewed the drug dose, frequency, the route of administration. Is there any therapeutic duplication? Are there any potential allergies or sensitivities? Is there any interaction between the food or the other medications? What is the hospital criteria for use, the patient weight, and other contraindications? So at this stage, the pharmacist is checking all these parameters. And then a medication is safely picked from the shelf, checked, dispensed. This either could be through the barcode dispensing, or it could be two patients who are verifying each other and dispensing this medication. So this is the stage where safe dispensing practices come into place. Then the medication has dispensed. It has reached to the ward, the patient care area. Now, what are the risks involved in the administration? The nurse has to review before the any medication order to be administered. She or he will review the physician order. He will review what the pharmacist has processed, right? How she is going to prepare this medication. She is going to perform the 5 hours or the 6 hours, as the case may be, right? The right patient, right administration. For the right patient, she has to use two identifiers, at least two identifiers: the patient name, the medical record number, right? The right patient, right time, the right medication, the right in the right dose, and via the right route, right? So all these checks she has to implement at this stage in order to ensure that no medication is administered wrongly to the patient. And for that, you take certain strategies here. Barcode medication administration is one of the strategy which you adopt at this stage. Now, once the medication is administered, the nurse monitors it. There needs to be protocols and the guidelines in place in this medication management system. How this medication is going to like if a protocol requires every 30 minutes the temperature of vitals to be recorded, whether the nurse is doing that, right? So this is it comes under monitoring. If there is any adverse drug reaction reported to a certain medication, that needs to be recorded, that needs to be communicated to the physician, that need to be reported to the hospital reporting tools. Because for the ADR reporting, this is one of also this a safe medication practice, that you also report, you collect the data of the ADRs occurring, and you take certain strategies based upon that. So if the nurse or the physician is not reporting the ADRs that are identified, no action can be taken for the future to prevent such medication errors or such adverse drug reactions occurring in the future, right? So at the monitoring level, it is very important that not only that you identify the intended response of a certain medications, you also identify the unintended, undesirable responses of a medication, and then based upon your hospital policy, you document it, you report it, and and based upon that reported information, that data is evaluated. So for the and this at this stage, it's not only the adverse drug reactions, medication errors, and medication near misses that is occurring throughout this life cycle. That is also needs to be reported, whether it is a near miss that did not reach to the patient, or it is an actual medication error that reached to the patient, and whether it caused harm or no harm, right? So this comes under the monitoring. Now the patient at patient discharge level, again the medication reconciliation has to occur. What the patient was taking at home, what were the medications that were used during the administration, and what is that being um, prescribed at the discharge level. So this is where the reconciliation again comes. And then at the end, evaluation. Now that is, this evaluation could be in the form of your outcomes. This evaluation could be in the form of your patient satisfactions. This could be in the form of your KPIs or your drug utilization evaluations, whatever the case may be, and the evaluation of your overall medication management system. When all this is done, when the checks and the policies are implemented at all this level, and these processes are monitored, then you can say that you have a safe medication management system, and you have a medication safety culture in your organization where everybody is sensitive towards medication safety. So now, there are two approaches. Whenever there is a medication errors or a medication safety concept, there are two kinds of approaches involved. The first is the personnel approach or the human approach, and in that kind of approach, you focus more on the individual's behavior, or you blame them for the forgetfulness or the error that happened, right? However, we need to understand that humans are prone to errors until unless it is a negligence at their part. Other than that, humans are prone to and this is not a safe approach. What is a safe approach? The safe approach is that you go for the systematic approach, where you concentrate on the conditions under which the individuals work. You try to build defenses, you try to build barriers so that the error does not occur. You make the environment such an environment, you create such an environment that the error does not occur. You proactively identify the gaps and the leaks and the weak links in the system, and you take actions, and you build defenses so that the error does not occur. And this system approach is a most reliable one, because if you do not take these approaches in place, what is going to happen? The Swiss cheese model, that all the circles in this Swiss cheese, they will be aligned, and the error will pass through and will reach to the patient. So it is very important that you build barriers in the Swiss cheese so that the error does not go through and reach to the patient. So what can be done? So you evaluate and implement the risk mitigation strategies. So for the evaluation and implementing risk mitigation strategies, where you can look for, you have international best practices available. You do not have to reinvent anything. These best practices, they are available. Institute of Safe Medication Practices, like for example, or the ASHP guidelines. They give you gap assessments that you evaluate your organization, your department on the best practices and the recommended strategies to improve the patient medication safety, and you see where do you lie, and you implement those risk mitigation strategies, and you make your system safe. What could be the other methods? Like I mentioned, you adopt or you use certain tools like FMEA, failure mode effect analysis. You proactively identify that what can go wrong in your system. You take the learning from the external medication safety risks and errors. All these institutes, they release or publish their reports each year. You identify what were the top 10 errors, what were the top 20 errors, and based upon those, they also give you the best practices to adopt, and take help from those best practices, take help from those guidelines, and you adopt those whatever suits your organization, what could be done, or you propose them to your leadership. You promote a medication safety culture. You promote um, this kind of attitude among your staff, that even if there is a near miss, you need to report that. If there is an ADR, you need to report it, and there will not be any punitive action against you. See, if you focus on the system, then your staff will have this confidence that this will not be held against you, and you can safely and you can, with confidence, without any fear, you can report. So different organizations, they adopt different strategies. Like I can quote from my organization, like we have online reporting tools for the ADR, for the incidents, and that tool gives you an opportunity to report anonymously as well. So the intention is to please report, and when all this is reported and all this the things done are in place, then you monitor and then you measure. If you have the processes in place, you have the documented practices and the guidelines available for your staff, you have made your system safe for your staff, what you do next? Then you keep on monitoring and you keep on measuring that whether that you are suggesting, um, is it up to the your intended objective or not. So I will briefly touch upon the key performance indicators. So what is the key performance indicators? This is something that can be counted and compared. And these indicators, they actually help you to track your success or your failure. You can track an organization's progress towards achieving intended goals related to your process inputs, inputs, outputs, and outcomes. So why to capture this? As I have mentioned already, you need to monitor your performance. If you need to further investigate, you need to reduce errors, you take the help of key performance indicators. There are different types of these key performance indicators. They could be structural, which is related to qualitative, and they give you information regarding the environment, whether you have hospital infrastructure, the culture, the system, and policies. Then another type is process, and this is related to the healthcare related activity that is being performed. And third is the outcome. That outcome indicators provide quantitative data related to the outcome of health systems. And this could be the morbidity, mortality, the satisfaction. So this is the different types how you can categorize your indicators. Now, they could also be categorized according to the managerial, clinical, and financial indicators. I have taken this screenshot from a publication which I have given its reference in at the end of my presentation as well. So this gives you a certain idea that what is meant by managerial indicators, what can be achieved out of those indicators. So here I am sharing with you to give you an idea which indicator you can pick for your department. Like what comes under clinical performance indicators, what is financial performance indicators. So what is from where to start? You identify your objective. What is that you want to achieve? What is the intended result? Which area you want to set a target? Then you identify a benchmark. Again, you do not need to develop your own benchmarks. These benchmarks targets are available in the literature. You need to identify what is the best practice, you adopt that. What is going to be your method of measurement? How you will gather the data? Is it going to be some report derived or extracted from the computer, or is it you have to manually calculate it? What is going to be your method of data? How you are going to collect it? How you will analyze, and then based upon your analysis, you develop your action plan. So this actually, through this KPI, this sets you or gives you the areas of your working, and this sets you and gives you sort of and this actually gives you that your services are quality appropriate. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ma'am Sarish, for all safety information related to medication. But all these efforts need to be measured as Ma'am has said. So the key performance indicator is a measurable value that demonstrates the effectiveness of all efforts made for medication safety. Our next speaker, Dr. Irfan Ali Bacha, who is currently working as Quality and Safety Manager at Al Qasim International Hospital, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. He is certified professional in healthcare quality, expert of implementing quality for organizational excellence. He is certified Lean Six Sigma Black Belt and also got training from European Foundation of Quality Management. Sir, it's over to you now.
Hello, Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam.
Okay, thank you very much for having so kind introduction of mine. And I would thank Dr. Satish for her deep insight into medication safety practices, as well as supporting her presentation with how to use KPIs and how we can develop KPIs. I will just try my best to complement her presentation with some examples on how we can develop KPIs and how we can bring them in practice.
Sir, we cannot hear you.
Yeah, just a minute. I cannot keep the slides on. Can you please moderate it because the slides are not moving at my side?
Okay, give me
I'll
some time.
stop share.
Okay, okay. You may start your talk. I will share.
Can you see the slides now? Okay. If you can see the slides now, it's okay with me now. I can go ahead.
No, we cannot see your slides.
You can't see it yet?
Yeah, we can see it now.
Okay.
Yeah, it's visible. It's perfect.
So the learning objectives are that is KPI typology and taxonomy, and aligning KPIs to strategic objectives and apply best practice techniques to KPI selection. So as KPI definition is already been defined, the KPIs in detail and the types, so I'm not going back to it. But there is certain things we start with metrics, and metrics are just things something that we can measure, we call it metrics. And if the metrics represent performance, in that case, it becomes a KPI. If it represents a risk area, or if it identifies a risk, so that in that case, it is termed or called as KRI, key risk indicators. And both leads to analytics, that what we get the data and we measure the data, we analyze the data, and it helps us in decision making. And then why I have to explain some like objectives, KPIs, and initiatives, because KPIs or BEL are established or developed based upon objectives. So objective starts with the verb always. Like for example, the example is given like increase customer satisfaction. So the increase itself is a verb. In that case, it will be an objective. Why I'm explaining this? Because many of the professionals, they do mistakes. They write an objective and consider it as a KPI. So KPI starts with like it will represent a value of, so that will be a dollar sign. If it is a number of, so that will be represented with a hashtag, and then percentage of, so that will be a % sign. So any KPI that will fall into these categories, you have to use these symbols. Otherwise, an expert may not consider it as a KPI even. So, and then based on the KPIs, we take some initiatives, and initiatives always starts with noun. Okay, in the definition, if you can see like a measurable expression for the achievement of desired level. So a measurable expression is what? It's an indicator. Desired level of results, that is what that represents performance. And the key is a relevant area. So that's how the definition itself can be broken into 3 parts, that is indicated, performance, and key. Now, some examples of metrics, as I mentioned, that anything that you can measure is a metric. Like, for example, humidity, purity, weight, height, temperature, whatever you measure, there is matrix. Now, when it becomes a KPI, okay, like for example, as I mentioned, there will be the symbols that you have to use, like hospital occupancy rate, so that percentage of hospital occupancy rate, then percentage of mortality rate. These are metrics, but representing some performance. So that's why we call it KPIs. Then revenues, net promoter scale, and so on. You can see all the expired medications even. So expired medication, what the value of expired medication in terms of money. So that in that case, it becomes a KPI. The KPI life cycle in our previous presentation, we explained this in detail. That is, it starts with KPI selection, KPI documentation, then data gathering, visualization, data analysis and reporting, decision making and initiatives. And the last is learning and performance culture. So we are just still on the KPI selection. That will be my part of presentation, and I'm going to through certain methodologies that will help us in KPI selection. Okay, before going to that, I have just to sketch the layout where it starts from. So we are very well aware of the PDSA cycle or the PDCA cycle. Plan, do, check, and act. So the KPI follow the same cycle as well. Everybody, I'm sure that aware of the PDSA cycle or the PDCA cycle. So how the KPIs follows that, because every organization is, of course, having a strategy, and strategy is what that you plan for something. Then to execute the strategy, you write your objectives. That is strategic objectives, and executing the strategy is what that is a do phase. Then objectives, to meet the objectives or to accomplish the objectives, we develop certain KPIs. And the KPIs is nothing, it is just to monitor or to check what you're doing, whether you are leading in the right directions or not. Then based on the KPIs, when you receive the results, then you have to take certain initiatives. You may initiate a PA projects on that, or you may change your processes. So that's what we call initiatives, and that in the PDCA cycle is an act phase. And then some performance architecture, that how you can map them, or how you can visualize the strategy, objectives, KPIs, and initiatives. I think that will be not required on departmental level. These are done on organizational level, so no need to go in detail. And then is KPIs cascading and alignment. So always it starts with corporate strategy, that hospital or any industry that is having a strategy, then they have their objectives, then KPIs, targets, and initiatives. And these are then cascaded to departmental levels, and departmental level objectives, KPIs, and targets are cascaded to individual level. So on individual level, of course, you will not assign a KPI to every single employee, but they can have certain targets to achieve, and those targets could be reflected in terms of departmental KPIs. Okay, this is the main part of my session, that how to select a KPI. So we'll be discussing only three things: that is KPI selection in practice, KPI selection sources, and KPI selection techniques. Now here, when you are going to select a KPI, it is always hard for professionals that where to start, what to do, how to do, where to get from. So the sources are available. I'm going to display some sources that where you can get information. Dr. Sarish also, she mentioned many good examples, that those are international and national level sources that you can refer to. I will be giving some other sources as well, but how to prepare for KPI selection. So you have to go through 3 steps: scope clarification, then KPI expo, then KPI clustering. These 3 things you have to do before you are selecting a KPI, before you are preparing yourself for selection of the KPI. You have to go through these 3 steps. Then facilitate the KPI selection. Once you are done with these 3 steps, then you have to select either of the 4. You are not going to do to go through each step of these 4 methodologies. No, one is enough to facilitate in the selection of KPIs, because you are done in the preparation phase. Now, what you have to do, you are just going to select a suitable KPI. So you can, this job can be done by either KPI selection workshop, and this is the best way to do. But if any hospital or any organization can do it, because this needs both management, quality department, other departments as well, like their managers and your department. So they need to be on board. If you can do that, that's well and good. If you cannot, so at least we expect the departments to go through value flow analysis. VFA is the second best technique after KPI selection workshop to select a particular set of KPI. Then there is another KPI balancing. And the fourth one is the relevant question framing. So I'm going through each of these. And the last will be KPI documentation, that you develop a KPI form and you start monitoring it. So these are some sources like industry standards, then benchmarking, competitors, external list, compliance, historical data, management, board, workshops. You can get data from this. You can, if you do not have it directly, even you can ask your quality department to provide the data that they may have either from the board or from the management, or the historical data that what OBRs, occurrence variance reporting, that it goes to the quality department, so you can get back from them. Compliance also, whether it's regulatory compliance, whether it's national accrediting bodies, or whether it's international accrediting bodies. So of course the results and the reports are with them, so you can get back from them. To refer to all those sources, you can use a variety of sources. Then the other way, there is internal, external, primary, and secondary sources. On the left side, on y-axis, there are internal sources, and on x-axis, there are internal and external, and y-axis, there is primary and secondary. So you can refer to these any of these sources. Nothing to explain here. These are only the list of sources that any professional can refer to. Okay, so the first is when you are preparing for a KPI selection. So this is the first thing that you have to do. You have to clarify the scope, that why you are going to measure this KPI, whether it's for you are going to measure an objective. So objective, I mean strategic objective. So in that case, you have to represent, or you have to present or portray those KPIs in terms of scorecard. When it's for processes, for daily activities or operations, so in that case, you display it as a dashboard. And why? Because it channels the selection process on a clear path with the specified scope and outputs are expected. Then the second is a KPI expo. And what does it include? This is a collection, curation, and presentation of relevant KPIs examples. You select a couple of KPIs from the KPI sources, whether internal or external, national or international. And then you decide on a particular set of those KPIs, and you assign to a particular objectives. And this is what we call is a KPI expo. And how to do it? This is that you collect from internal or external sources, or using internal sources to identify KPIs like operational reports, or you can refer back to your quality department, quality and patient safety department. The third one is KPI clustering. You have to practice all these when you are preparing for KPI selection. You cannot opt a single methodology. You have to go through 3 of them. The clustering is, as the word represents, so you grouping KPIs in different categories. Like if it is, for example, for whether the KPIs are assigned or aligned to a strategic objective, then we call it a balanced scorecard or a scorecard simple. If it is for a dashboard, so in that case, if it is for daily operations, so in that case, it is you assign to a dashboard. and then either VFA, that is value flow analysis, or process steps, that is input, output, and so that will be in the value flow analysis. These are different ways that you can assign, or you can group a couple of, or a group of, or a set of KPIs into a particular subject or under a particular objective. Okay, why this is needed? Because this enables alignment. And once you do it, so you may identify also some gaps that you are not measuring while you need to measure it. So this will help you in identifying the gaps. This is a scenario like, for example, from a scorecard, that is strategic scorecard, I can say that they want you to write KPIs for 4 objectives, that is whether for 4 domains, I can say: financial, customer, people, learning and growth, and internal processes. So you can ask your staff, you can ask the team of KPIs development, whether it is departmental or whether it is intra-departmental or interdepartmental. So you can ask them to go through different sources and then let them bring their KPIs, that what they think that those KPIs would be developed for our hospital or for the department, and then you group them into different domains, like the financial, that you put under the financial, then customer, people, learning and growth, and internal processes. How it can be done, to make it more simply, how it can be done on pharmacy level. So let's see the scenario that develop KPIs to track the performance of antibiotic stewardship program. For example, a pharmacy or a hospital want to develop an antibiotic stewardship program, and they want to assign certain KPIs for this program to see that whether what they do will be appropriate or not. So first of all, as I mentioned, that you have to define the scope, whether it is strategic objective, like for example, you are going for JCI accreditation or re-accreditation, and one of the JCI standard is that you must have antibiotic stewardship program in the hospital. So you need to meet a strategic objective. For that, you need to develop a program, and then you need to assign KPIs for that. Number 2, it could be operational, that you just want to improve the departmental performance and the outcome or the output of antibiotic use in the hospital, though it is not mandated by certain accrediting bodies. So this could be operational, and you can display it in terms of dashboard. Then inclusion and exclusion criteria you have to select, and this could be like you might be doing this antibiotic stewardship program only in critical areas or in pediatric ICUs, or it could be like in general surgical department. So it depends that what you want to include, what you want to exclude, or it could be like only inpatient, excluding outpatient, and you can say that I want to see the antibiotic stewardship program in ambulatory settings. So this will be your inclusion. Then who and how, who need to be included in the team, and how it will be carried out. Then the third will be expo. There is external sources, like you can look for IHI, HRQ, WHO, SHP, SIDP. So these are different sources that you can look for, that what kind of KPIs they are using to monitor antibiotic stewardship program. Then internal sources could be QIPs, that is quality improvement and patient safety reports, infection prevention and control reports on drug resistance and antibiotic consumption, antibiogram, etc. So this is how you look into different sources. You collect a couple of KPIs, or a group of KPIs, or a number of KPIs. Now the last is clustering. You categorize those KPIs into different domains or objectives. And that's what I did. Again, the same example, that financial, I clustered some KPIs under financial, then some under customer, then some under internal processes, and some other people, learning and growth. So you can use the same pattern, like 4 domains that you have to select: financial, customer, internal process, people, learning and growth, because this will facilitate you in writing number of KPIs and then also grouping them. So this is a best technique that if you can do it, and then you can go through the examples like percent of budget variance, this anything under monetary, so that will come under financial. Then customer, of course, percent of customer satisfaction. Internal processes could be like percentage of Klebsiella resistance rate, C. difficile rate, IV to oral switch, whatever. And then people learning and growth, what we can get from this. What I mean, the staff can get out of it. So this is also training hours per FTE, percentage of employees trained on the program. This will be in the domain of people learning and development. So this is, we are done with, now we are prepared for selecting a KPI. We are prepared for selecting a KPI. Now the next stage is you have to pick one methodology only out of the 4 that what I mentioned, that how to select. We are prepared now. We have the sources. We have number of KPIs. We group them. We cluster them. Now we need to select a particular KPI, a particular methodology for the final selection of KPIs. Then, so this is the first one, is relevant question framing. You can start asking questions like focus on the importance and relevancy of context, that why you want to measure a particular KPI. For example, as I mentioned, satisfaction rate. So yes, somebody might, a pharmacy manager may ask me, or infection prevention and control, they may ask me that, why you want to, why do you think customer satisfaction, like patient satisfaction, how it is relevant to antibiotic stewardship program? What it will add? What if we don't measure it? What if we can measure it in a better than this way? So these could be questions in order to finalize a particular set of KPIs. The second, as I mentioned, this is the best way after having, if you cannot have a workshop, so this is the second best way, value flow analysis, we call it VFA in short, to identify a particular set of KPIs. What is VFA? It's a logical model to indicate the value generation from inputs, process, outputs, and outcomes. 4 things. What's important? Because it gives you insight how the objectives can be measured from different perspectives. Like one objective, you can measure from input perspective, process, output, and outcome. The second is it provides an overview of the process involved by achieving the objective. And it enables the selection of the most relevant KPIs for the objective. This is how it looks like. You will practice it like this. You put your objective, optimize inpatient inflows. Then what KPIs will come into inputs, what KPIs could be grouped into process, then what KPIs could be grouped into output, and then into outcome. But before doing this practice, you have to know that what are input measures, process measure, output measure, and outcome measure. And there is a simple key. So you have to follow this key. That is, input measures measures the quantity or quality of input resources. And those input resources could be human resources, financial resources, and infrastructure. So you have to remember 3 things: human, financial, and infrastructure. Whatever is related to these 3 parameters, it will be into input matrix. And the examples are like number of employees, number of physicians, number of skilled, competent staff, then financial resources, budget, grants, bank loans, etc., and medical equipment availability. Okay, so then we moving to process. In the process measure, it includes measures the quantity or quality of the activities required to provide certain expected output. So therefore, in the input, we were measuring what? The resources, input resources. And here we are measuring the quality or quantity of activities, okay? And this will include 2 things, time and utilization. So any KPI that is measuring the aspects of time and or utilization, that will be into process matrix. And it is important to understand the input, process, output, and outcome metrics are measures, because if you don't really understand this, so you will assign a KPI to a wrong measure then. And it is like percent on time delivery vaccination, time to finalize a task. So this will be a process measure, and utilization is percent of equipment utilization rate, etc. The third one is output. The output matrix measured the quantity or quality of the goods or services created. This is the difference, that in the output, you just see the quantity or quality of the goods or services created. But in the outcome, you measure the impact or the added value. This is the difference between output and outcome matrix. In output, it generally includes quantifiable results. For example, number of patients vaccinated, treatment delivered, like I can say, surgical number of surgeries performed, etc. Then in the outcome measure, a matrix, it measures the quantity or quality of the results achieved through the provision of goods and services. So through the provision of goods and services, that's what we were measuring in the output. Now the results achieved through that, we call it outcome matrix. This is an important distinctions or a difference between outcome and output measures. And they generally include added value and impact. Impact could be incidence, a percent of incidence of disease or mortality rate. In terms of added value, that could be savings generated by innovation ideas, patient identification, patient satisfaction index. This is also any KPI that is measuring satisfaction. So we categorize into outcome metrics. So now we know the input, process, output, and outcome matrix. And now let's assign certain KPIs from those metrics to a particular objective. I will just go with the first one only. Like, for example, your objective is ensure staff immunization for COVID-19 in a hospital. We had COVID-19, we are still having, we are in the era of COVID-19. So once the COVID-19 infection started, so the hospital started to immunize their staff. So this could be one of your objective, that ensure that, let's say 90 to 100% of the staff, they receive vaccination. Now, what KPIs can you assign to this particular objective from input measures, from process measures, output and outcome? Like the budget, this is input measure. Then the staff or the number of, that is anything that is coming into infrastructure or the staff, or even that is human resources, financial resources, or infrastructure. Those will be grouped into input. When we talking about the process matrix, so anything that is measuring the time or utilization, that will be a process measure, like percent on time delivery of vaccination program. And the outcome is quantifiable results, that is number of staff vaccinated. So now see the difference between output and outcome. Number of staff vaccinated, but this is not an outcome. Why? Because you just vaccinate a staff. Will they get reinfected or not? This is now a question. If they will get reinfected, so how many times they are going to go for sick leave again? So the number of sick leaves that the staff is taking per month or per year or per quarter or per week, this is what is the outcome. Because we want to decrease the impact on the hospital. And this will be decreased in terms of once you measure the number of sick leaves that the staff is taking. And this is what we call an outcome measure. Or it could be like percent of incidence of disease. How many staff are still getting infected? That is an outcome measure. But the output is only a direct measure, that how many staff you vaccinated. That is an output. Let me just go to a particular objective. Like operate, you have an objective to operate in an environment that fosters creativity and innovation. You have a set of KPIs. I have grouped them, I have mentioned them into 12. There are 12 sets of KPIs. Now it is practice that how to categorize them or how to assign them into input, process, output, and outcome measure. So I have just mentioned the digits only, that 1, 4, and 6. These are input measures. Anything measuring human, financial, and infrastructure resources, these are input measures. The process is time and utilization, and output is quantifiable results, and the outcome is added value and impact. I will just go. I will more simplify it for the sake of pharmacists, that how they can. I will use the same example as establish or develop AMS, antimicrobial stewardship program, that we did up in the KPI selection, in preparing for KPI selection. So here again, I will use the same examples and I will group them into input, process, output, and outcome measures. Like 115, one is operating expense. So it is measuring what? Finance. That's why it is an input matrix or input measure. 15 is number of staff hired for this program to undertake. Maybe you are going to hire an infectious disease certified pharmacist, so or maybe link staff in the area, maybe infection control practitioners or whoever, or maybe an ID pharmacist or even ID physician. So whoever been hired for this program, so this will be a human resource that we are going to measure, and we call it input measures. Then process measure, that is anything measuring time and utilization, and 3 and 13 is grouped into process measure. 3 is what? Number of IV to oral switch, how many times that you switch an antibiotic from IV to oral. And 13 is training hours per FTE, how much time you spend to train a particular number of or particular set of employees or staff for this program. So that will be a process measure. Then output is 5, 6, 7, and 14. 5 is like market share. Like, for example, what is the relevance of market share with this particular objective? So this is like, for example, you develop or you implement this program in your hospital, and you want now to expand this to other hospitals. So you can have an increased market share.
Sorry, sir, to interrupt you. May I request you to please wind up because we are going short of time and we will have question and answer as well.
This is the last slide that I'm going to explain, and the next two only just to display. I'm not going to explain anything in that. In the outcome, that is anything in the added value or the impact, that is incidence of disease like C. difficile rate, saving per patient per day, or patients develop adverse events. These will be all will be outcome measures. And the third one is KPI balancing. The pharmacist at this point, they are not going to, I would not advise to use a KPI balancing methodology. If is the best methodology to use, and KPI balancing is nothing. It is just like a particular set of KPIs you balance with others. Like if you are having leading KPIs, you add a certain set of lagging KPIs to balance the leading. Then effectiveness, if KPIs are measuring effectiveness, you need to balance it with efficiency, quantity with quality, subjectivity with objectivity. And that was the fourth one, but this is what I mentioned. This is the most important, that if you can do a workshop, that is the most recommended way on how to select KPIs, if you can do it. And that's it. So there are no audience. I just put up all question, and this question was put just for a purpose only, that when it is written which KPI is best suitable. So when the term best, so you have to look for the outcome, not for the input, not for the process, not for the output. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for this informative session. Sir, I request you to please display your last slide so that during a question answer session, if someone want to comment, they can. So the first question that we had was, does any guidelines need to be added as a part of information to be inserted in the formulary to maintain the medication safety in the hospital? Ma'am Sarish, may I request you to please answer this question?
Sorry, Marian, can you repeat that question, please?
Yeah, Faryal was asking that the information that we put in the formulary, there any specific instruction related to the medication safety does need to be inserted in that formulary.
Yes, in the formulary, you can put if there are certain risks identified. Like, for example, whenever you put up information in the formulary, you other than the dosage instructions, how it is to be used, how it is to be administered, and at what strength is available. Other than that, you can also mention that if there is any safety risk identified, like for example, it's a high lead medication, or it's a look-alike medication, or a sound-alike medication, or it has certain interaction with this drug. So all this information does go into formulary. Yes. I hope I have answered
Thank you
this
so much.
question.
Thank you so much. Next question we have to Dr. Irfan, that if KPI can be used as research-based studies.
Yeah, of course. KPIs could be used for research base, or if you want to augment your research, that what you conduct. So, what is the output or the outcome of that, or how you conduct the studies? You can assign input measures. You can assign even process measures. That what you measure, whom you measure, where did you measure, and whom you included. So, how many surveys were being conducted, and what was the process? So, for any particular step, you can assign a KPI. And that I would suggest that if anybody can do it, that will add value to the research that you do. And of course, to the outcome and to the output and outcome. It could be for educational purpose, it could be for research, it could be for operation on strategic objectives on a strategic level, or it could be even at personal level.
Thank you so much to both speakers for these valuable information. We will have our conference at 23rd and 24th of September. All participants are requested to please fill the feedback form and keep in touch with us and be there at the conference for more learning opportunities. Thank you and Allah Hafiz.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Allah Hafiz.